Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming today. I'm Dave Sunderline, and welcome to Salem, Virginia's championship city. It's so good to have you here for an important conversation about the work we're doing in Richmond to empower parents, because the ultimate goal is protecting our young Virginians. And I hope you all join me and my wonderful wife Ashley in welcoming our 74th governor of the Commonwealth, Glenn Youngkin.
Hello, everybody. All right, this is great. We're gonna need a bigger room next time, Dave. Yeah, just so appreciate everybody coming out. So, we're gonna have a conversation today, and I think it's an incredibly important conversation about being a parent and the responsibilities of being a parent, but also the rights that we have as parents to be able to raise our children consistent with the values that reflect you. Not bureaucrats and politicians. And so I'm very excited that so many people have joined us today. We have a lot of friends here that I just want to point out just a couple. And so everybody knows Delegate Terry Austin back here. And Senator Peake over here. Delegate McNamara right here. And for those of you that haven't met Chris Obenshane, he's about to be a delegate. So thank you all for being here and participating. And I just wanted to reiterate, as I travel around this extraordinary Commonwealth, and we do everything we can to get out of Richmond. It's actually a big part of what we believe is that we work for you, and therefore our responsibility is to get out of Richmond and listen. And I constantly am reminded that when we sit down in rooms like this, we learn a lot. And when we learn a lot, it helps us do our jobs better. And so I just want to thank everybody for taking time on a Friday and participating. And boy, there's a lot of you here. So thank you for that. Listen, being a parent is hard, but it's an incredible blessing. And I know the Suderlines know that. They've been blessed 4 times. And by the way, Suzanne and I have been blessed 4 times too. I guess everybody should have 4 kids. but it is such a blessing. And one of the things that I think is most important is that we have an opportunity to, in fact, raise our children consistent with our values, as I mentioned. Oftentimes it gives us the opportunity around our tables in the evening when we're having dinner or around the breakfast table in the morning to talk about life and to discuss things that are really important. And that to me is one of the most special times in the life of being a parent. This past session, there were a lot of discussions that were had around parental rights and the fact that parents do matter. One of them really focused on the real challenge that we're seeing in so many of our children around the almost domination of our children's attention by social media. And the role that social media is playing, not just in the day-to-day interactions of our children, but their mental health. Yeah. And the recognition that we see study after study after study that is demonstrating that our children are truly in a mental and behavioral health crisis in so many ways. Kids have, since 2016, have demonstrated twice the rate of suicide thoughts. We see 40% of kids in a recent poll that said that they were depressed for up to 2 weeks at a time. 1 out of 5 children have contemplated suicide. I mean, this is a crisis, and there are many, many factors coming out of the pandemic where schools were unnecessarily shut for an extended period of time, where parents were told that your child looking at a 12-inch screen every day was a quality education, that isolation that came along with it. But also on that list has to be the consistent and constant influence from social media on our kids. And so Senator Sudeline carried a bill this past year. It was an important bill. He worked long and hard with a lot of families and a lot of parent advocates in order to bring this bill to the Senate. And it was a bill that did one basic thing. It took the protections that currently exist in Virginia for 13-year-olds and under from social media companies from being able to gather the kids' data and sell it and market back to them without their parents knowing, and it extended it to when they were 18. Now, this is pretty much common sense, and it didn't get out of the House committees that oftentimes are controlled by folks that believe social media companies should take precedent over our children. And I was so stunned by that, because a very similar bill was introduced in the House, and it made it out of committee, and it went to the House floor, and it passed nearly unanimously. Nearly unanimously, Republicans and Democrats. But in the Senate that is controlled by Democrats, it was defeated in a committee along party line votes, which I just thought was stunning. But I want to thank you for championing that bill, David, and so that's what we're going to talk about today. So the way this is going to work is, and for those of you who've done these with me before, it's my favorite thing to do, which is to hear from all of you. But I'm going to start by asking Ashley and David a few questions, and really benefiting from where they are in life. So you all have 4 children, and we're going to talk about their kids. And one of them has a birthday today, actually, which is really exciting. Your oldest, yeah, he's 12 today. Yeah, pretty Dylan, right? He's 12 today, which is really exciting. But then I'm going to turn around and we're going to ask you all some questions, and so get warmed up, stretch out, because it's when we hear from all of you that I think we absolutely benefit the most. And we might even involve someone who might be a target audience today. How are you today? No pressure at all. None. Okay, so first of all, for those of you that don't know, Ashley and David, as I said, they have 4 children. Actually, the children own them. We all know how this works. They have four great kids. And Ashley, why don't you just tell us a little about your kids and tell us a little bit about you and David and how long you've been married and all that good stuff.
Well, David and I have been married for 13 years now. Our son is turning 12 today. That's Dylan. He's about to start middle school. Maria's 9. We have Laura Louise, who's 4, and Daniel's the little one. He's 1.
He's 1. Yeah, he's 1. When Daniel was born, of course, we were in session in Richmond, and the senator did the right thing and left. So congratulations on great judgment, sir. So let me just start with a real basic one, which is you have 4 kids, and I know Daniel probably doesn't have an iPhone yet, but how do you think about social media and the access to it in the life of your kids? And Ashley, why don't you start with that?
Well, our children, when they're online, we keep a pretty close eye on where they're going, and they don't have Facebook, they don't have phones yet, so we don't want our girls or any of our kids being exposed to some of the bad things that are out there, just like what we're trying to protect against. So we just keep a really close eye on it.
Yeah. So interesting. So you, just to be clear, you have a 12-year-old who does not have an iPhone.
No, he does not.
Yeah. So by the way, part of being a parent is parenting. And so that's just a good statement. I think one of the biggest challenges is that the peer pressure for our kids is so great to get hold of one of these phones. And oftentimes as parents, we kind of want to be friends too. And so we occasionally we'll allow our kids to do something we know that's not that great for them. So thank you for being a good parent. So David, your bill, tell me about what inspired you, and tell me about the work you did going into it, and particularly, you know, as you did something that was very simple, which is changing age from 13 to 18 in a part of the code, kind of who was involved for and who was involved against.
Well, the public was pretty strongly for it.
Yeah.
I didn't really get emails from citizens that didn't think it was a good idea, but there were several folks with large tech companies that thought it was a terrible idea. And the current internet privacy law we have in Virginia, I don't think is very strong. It was something that was written during the previous administration, basically by the tech companies. Well, the General Assembly, the House of Delegates under Democrat control at the time wasn't even meeting in person. And I don't think people realize how important the meeting in person aspect is, because people will talk to you about, hey, have you actually looked at these parts of it? Imagine the difference when you're scattered across the Commonwealth with 100 people. And not everyone was as diligent as several of our local legislators actually did go to Richmond. And so it flew through at the very end of one of these sessions where the Senate was still meeting in Richmond, but the House wasn't. And it didn't offer many protections. I don't think it offered many protections to adults, but it really didn't for young people. And it was striking that several of the proponents of it, just a few years earlier, had been telling me that we must raise the tobacco purchasing age up to 21 because we shouldn't be trusting 19 and 20-year-olds to do that. And I had a difference of opinion with them on that, but okay, I trust that that is their judgment. They think it should be 21. And for several other provisions in law, they say we need to take it up to 21, some things even like health insurance up to 26. But for being on the internet, they thought 13 was good to go. And you know, I don't have a 13-year-old yet, but I'm not anticipating in this next year there's that much maturity that's going on. And I just, you know, I've seen it in several of my friends who do have children a few years ahead of mine in age, and just the rush of marketing. I think a lot of us see it as adults, what we get, you know, you'll jokingly talk about a product in conversation, and amazingly, it's advertised on your phone not too long later or on the internet. But what they're especially doing with these young folks, that especially are image conscious, they're just barraging them with this information. And Governor, you mentioned several of those studies, which those are things that I had regular constituents telling me, hey, I read this in an article. I can tell you I didn't need an article because I saw it with my own kid. And especially I hear it from folks with daughters, and the concern they have on body image and everything that's being sent to their children.
Well, to that point, 80% of children are online frequently, almost all day. 25% of kids are viewed as being online all the time. Think about that. In front of social media, all the time, all day, that's all they get. And that's the influence that's running into their lives. And so as you started meeting with folks to talk about this bill, what were the arguments against it?
Well, the primary arguments against it from the tech companies were that maybe it ought to be national, but I also talked to my friends that are working at the federal level about how much resistance they're getting at the federal level.
Maybe it should be local. Right?
That's right. And it was just amazing. They always say, well, let's just delay it. Let's study it some more.
Yeah, I think, you know, what's interesting is that at the federal level, there's a big movement to do something similar at the federal level as well. But we're not going to wait for the federal level. You know, this is something that we're going to get back on the agenda when we're back in session in January. Maybe we'll have a majority in the Senate and we won't have the same problem next time. Let me ask you a little bit about Dylan turning 12 and what happens with the teenager as he's a preteen and heads into it. How do you seek counsel and advice, or what are your thoughts around the fact that getting that cell phone and being like his friends is going to continue to be a bigger and bigger pressure?
right now, we're really glad he's got good friends, so that helps a lot.
Who, significant number who do have phones.
They do have phones, but you're not putting the pressure on them. So,
He hasn't told you that, but they all have phones and he doesn't.
we do it.
Well, it is, I mean, it is probably the hardest part about it is the peer pressure. We had the same battle with our 4 kids along the way, and we were always the last one, to let our kids get a phone. And therefore, we were always the worst parents ever. I get called a lot of names, so being a worst parent ever didn't bother me. Didn't bother me, so. Fabulous. Okay, well, let's open up here a little bit. And so now you've got a little bit of the table setting for the conversation. And I get to ask some particular questions. And let me just get this first one started, which is, let's just reflect as parents on feeling in the dark about what's going on in your kids' lives. And what areas you're particularly noticing it, what areas feel most uncomfortable when it comes to what's going on in your kids' lives. And let's just start a conversation there. Perfect. You have a microphone in your hand, so you're probably gonna go first.
I guess so.
Could you just tell everybody who you are?
Yes, my name is Amy Sneed, and my husband and I are also blessed to have 4 children. We have 4 boys, 2 of which are teenagers. We also are the worst parents ever because we heard that, oh, my friends have phones and I don't. So, we held out as long as we could for the job. I think when you're talking about the social media aspect, I think the companies really owe the parents the responsibility to be back in the forefront of that conversation. I appreciate even that these conversations are taking place because it puts parents back at the head of the table when we've been placed behind fairly significantly over the last few administrations. But, I think at age 12 or 13, children can't enter into a contract. They can't go to a cell phone store and sign up for their own plan because they're still under the obligation and responsibility of their parents. And so for them to be able to access social media, which through our volunteer work across our own county and the Commonwealth, I talk to parents all the time. I've yet to hear really positive stories of kids and their interaction on social media. It tends to be that, growing up and going to school in the 80s and 90s when I did, when you left school, you left the playground bully at school, right? They didn't follow you home in your pocket like they do now. And so, from the parent of a teenager and one who talks with parents all over our county, this is a huge concern and it's not getting any better. I really appreciate the work that our former sheriff, Mike Brown, and Delegate Michael Walker have put forth. The education part of this is huge, but I think if I can throw in my 2 cents, it's not just educating the students on the dangers of social media, it's also educating the parents on how strongly the social media companies are trying to keep parents in the dark on this. Even a tech-savvy parent is surprised to learn about the hidden folders and files on Snapchat or the way that conversations can disappear and be hidden. And so I think it's a 2-pronged approach. We need to be putting in policies that protect our students and protect our children, but also ones that empower parents to have access to those things that are being hidden from them.
Has anybody seen this? Anybody seen the education in action, and what kinds of things have been most effective in educating parents?
The thing that was most educational to me was a movie on Netflix called The Social Dilemma.
Yeah, scared you to death, didn't it?
Yes, and I didn't realize how addicting the cell phones were and how all of the accounts were linked. I raised my daughter as a conservative Christian. She went to Benton. We lived in Benton, Virginia. She went to Williamsburg High School. I moved to Benton just with conservative values, and she was raised as a very conservative Christian. She and I did mission work in Kenya, and she was involved in the youth group, and she was a summer camp counselor, Christian counselor. And then when she was 17 or 18, I was a single parent. I was divorced. Her father, against my wishes, gave her a cell phone. And she started getting into Snapchat and all these things, and I felt like it polluted her mind. And I wasn't as aware of how terrible it was. I was really super, super, super strict with her on Facebook. Or back then it was MySpace. But it was like I had to have access to her account. and I had to read everything. So she was meeting a boy, like one day she told me she had a boyfriend, and I had been like looking at her account when she was spending like with her grandmother. I said, oh no, you don't. I said, this is what he looks like, and this, you're not. And so she dropped it. And so there are ways for parents to intervene. You've got to find out how to intervene on every conversation that is being made on social media. Shadow all of those phones, even PlayStation, or a friend of my daughter's was playing a game on the computer. Her parents didn't allow her computer access or a cell phone. She was playing a game on a computer, and she meets this guy from New York. Now this girl lived in Benton, okay, little old Benton, Virginia. And she had made plans to meet this guy from New York at the school prom at Wayneburg High School. And she wanted to make up a story that she was spending the night with one of her other friends. Well, whether one of her other friends mentioned something to the parents, her parents about it, because she wasn't quite sure if she wanted, if she should do this. Thank God the parents were able to intervene in time, but it was this close, guys, this close to happening, this girl being taken, okay? I would also recommend seeing The Sound of Freedom, because sex trafficking is out there, guys, and it's in Snapchat. It's on the games that you play, the game councils. So please, please, please be involved. What happened to my daughter is I was very ignorant as to all of these things. And when she applied for college, my budget was really tight and I was pretty ignorant. And she got accepted to Liberty, and it didn't look like we could afford it, so we chose another university. It looked like it would be a safe place because it was an all-girls school and there were a lot of campus rapes going on at the time, so I thought this would be a safe place. I didn't realize it was going to be a brainwashing institution. She went from being a very strong conservative Christian saying, I'm trying to find Christian friends, but I don't understand how you can be Christian and be pan or bi, and I'm not judging anybody, I'm not the gatekeeper. But she went from that, like, I don't see how you can be Christian and be, let's say you're pan or you're bi or you're lesbian. And I'm not the gatekeeper, guys, okay? But this school brainwashed her in every aspect. It was Hollins University, I'll tell you straight up. Okay, Hollins University. She got a Christian scholarship, a missionary. It was founded on Christian principles, but every class she had, one was called Gays Across the World. Not Gaze, but Gays. They convinced these girls that even Lottie Moon was a lesbian, okay? So y'all be careful.
Thank you. I think our clear message is,
Sorry about
first
that.
of all, no, I think our clear message here is, one, be engaged fully and make sure that you are in fact able to see what your kids are up to. And second of all, there may be some ways that we can at the community level really offer opportunities, and we might look for some friends, really offer some opportunities for there to be some parental education sessions and invite people to do it. I think it's really, really, really important. So, yes, ma'am.
Where's the mic?
Went over this way. Sorry about that, Nicole.
Oh, that's okay. I don't need it. From what I'm hearing, I think it begs the question, what is our state doing or what is proposed to do about the mental health of children?
Yeah.
And this seems to me to be the core issue. I am blessed to have raised my children back in the 50s and 60s, that comes to my age. I'm 80, I'm in my 8th decade. And I'm so sad today that kids today don't have the joy of the kids of the 50s and 60s. We could go out and play, ride the bike until once and the street lights are on, come in, right? Like kick the can until 10 o'clock at night. They don't have that joy. All they have is something in front of them that's telling them what to do, what to think, and how to think. They don't have social skills. They don't know how to interact with people. They don't know how to negotiate their way out of trouble. On the playground, that used to be the leveler. You either fought your way out or you talked your way out. They don't do that today. They have no idea how to negotiate with people. And again, I think the core issue really is the mental health of children, and it frightens me that there is no place for them to turn.
Thank you. So that's such a great comment. And in fact, where I started this discussion was the combination of the mental health of our kids and the influence that social media has on it, particularly when it is uninterrupted and becomes part of their life all the time. One of the big challenges that we face as a Commonwealth and as a country is this mental health and behavioral health pandemic that we're in. We truly are. And we, this past December, at the state level, working with lots of people across the state, rolled out an overhaul, a true transformation of our behavioral health system, because it needs it. And we have a behavioral health system that is just overwhelmed right now. Overwhelmed on all fronts. It's overwhelmed with our kids, it's overwhelmed with adults, it's overwhelmed with the elderly. And it's overwhelmed in such a way that unfortunately, only the most acute cases are able to seek any kind of support, when in fact we have so many Virginians who literally just need someone to talk to. So we rolled out an entire transformation that's called Right Help, Right Now. And it is comprehensive. And for those of you that have spent any time with me, I like to think comprehensive. I don't think that there's a single magic wand to any tough problem. And in this case, our behavioral health challenge requires a comprehensive solution. It's a three-year transformation plan. And it starts in year one by building capacity. We do not have enough capacity. We don't have capacity in what I call pre-crisis, which is when folks just need someone to speak with or need to address a particular issue that doesn't place them into crisis. But if we can catch folks early, it's great. And of course, our children are most exposed. And so the capacity building pre-crisis is counselors in schools, and using, now we're back to technology, but using telemedicine in order to provide scale so that we've been doing it at the university level this last year in a pilot that's worked incredibly well. But then we also have to build capacity in crisis. And we have a huge challenge. There are basic deserts of support. And in fact, Greater Roanoke is one of them. And so we in fact have proposed to have mobile crisis units invested in across the Commonwealth. And we went out and found best practices around the nation. And it just so happened that Arizona had the best practices around how to have a mobile crisis center infrastructure. And on top of that, our next investment is in crisis receiving centers. So these are specified places, not the emergency room, but specified places that are equipped and staffed to deal with a behavioral health or mental health crisis. The best ones, in fact, have two doors. One that is a law enforcement door when they have a real challenge, and another one where folks can walk in off the street and seek help. Because we're trying to do two things. We're trying to decriminalize behavioral health challenges. We're trying to relieve law enforcement of the tremendous responsibility that they take on when they are responsible to transport someone who's having a crisis. And we're trying to also provide an opportunity for people to know where they can go for help. This is a big investment. And then finally, an investment in where folks can go as they move back from a hospital setting or an acute setting back to their home, but oftentimes they can't go directly. And there's not enough capacity in the system for a place for them to go. And so there is a huge need for workforce. So how do we have more psychiatrists and psychiatric nurse practitioners and counselors? And some of it we were able to tackle this past year, where with great help from our legislative partners, we were able to create effectively a passport of licensing into Virginia. And 85 job categories we passed, that if you have a counseling license and you're in another state, come to Virginia and go to work right away, because we need to build the workforce. All of this is in motion, but we need funding. And so I put into my budget amendments last December now, $230 million of incremental funding on top of the $430 million that we already included to build the system the year before. So $660 million of incremental funding in order to build capacity into the system. That's big step one. The budget's stuck. It's really frustrating to me. We're gonna have a $3.6 billion surplus this year, on top of the huge surplus that we had last year. And I remind everybody, last year we had $4 billion of tax cuts that we passed collectively and I signed. We invested a record amount in education, the largest education budget that Virginia has ever had, closing gaps for teacher pay, investment in schools, launching lab schools. We invested a record amount in law enforcement, raising starting salaries and in equipment and training. And we can do this again. This is not an war moment because we have a giant surplus again. That means Virginians are being overtaxed, by the way, when you keep running huge surpluses. And that's your money. And so we can reduce taxes and we can invest $2.6 billion in mental and behavioral health and education and law enforcement. We can do both. It's not an or moment, it's an and moment. So I thank you for raising that very important topic. And I just, as I went through that, describe it, I want to stop for a minute and now push it back to you. What are we missing? What should we be thinking about? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Jessica Blandy, and I am the president of the Roanoke City Central Council PTA. I am also a parent to two, and I also have the privilege of teaching in Roanoke City.
Awesome, bless you.
So I'm listening to your behavioral health system overhaul, and I realize that you have to start at that macro level, and we're in year one. But on a very micro level, I look at what we have available as the pre-crisis, as the prevention at the school level. We used to have an abundance of behavioral health workers in our elementary schools, and they were the step between. They were the step between calling your principal. They were the step between suspension, which, as we know, suspension is not really effective, although sometimes necessary to keep all students safe. Those programs just aren't funded anymore. We don't have the behavioral support, and this year was one of the first years that it really came home to me because I had a student drop out of public schooling and become homeschooled. And I, as a teacher who's proud of the system that I work in, it was heartbreaking to see that there was a missing link and that I had seen behavioral work before. And had we had that missing step, I think his outcome could have been very different. And I think we all know the statistics about, building infrastructures based on third, fourth grade reading scores. And to speak to your question, I feel like that's what we need. And I feel like if you ask any public school teacher, on a bigger level, we need more involved parents. We need, the crisis intervention. We need all of that. But on a very micro level, that is something teachers and public school systems are sorely missing.
Okay, counselors. Principal counselors in the building.
Well, Roanoke City in particular, and that's really the only one I can speak to because that's the only budget I follow. We put into place a lot more counselors, we have in-house social workers, especially in our Title I schools. But these were outside agencies that brought in therapeutic day treatment, TDT. And they were not employed by the school system. So that almost gave the parents a level of trust, right? It was not just, oh, the school's calling me in trouble. This was the step before. This was counseling before these kids got sent home, sent to behavioral schools, alternative education. So, and I know that I speak for all over this region that TDT is sorely missed.
Okay, great, thank you. Thank you. Any other thoughts?
I have one.
Oh, perfect. Thank you for that.
Hi, I'm Andrea Smith, and I'm actually a licensed professional counselor, and I used to have that job. At the very beginning, graduating college, I was in and out of schools, in and out of homes with the same caseload of children, so I know exactly what you're talking about. As a parent now, and hearing all of this, one, I'm very thankful, for the leadership and you being great parents and leading and setting the example, going back to technology. Um, it goes back to the parents, right? Who buys the phones? Who allows those things to come in, which affects mental health. We'll talk about that in a moment. So I appreciate that example that you're leading because that's extremely important. I think it's also important to know that we adults can be just as addicted to technology than our children. Our children just watch, right? They don't necessarily learn what they're taught, they learn what's caught. And so unfortunately, a lot of parents don't recognize that their addictive behavior is just being channeled down the line. So we do need workshops in churches and schools and community libraries about the harms of technology of addiction and how depression, social anxiety, suicide, all the diagnoses are affected by that. As well as, most importantly, what was brought up earlier about the Sound of Freedom movie, child pornography, and how we are the leading industry this country is, and that's something we can talk about all day long. But to protect our children from predators. And so going back to what can we do about it in schools, I just recently a conservative Christian activist in my community trying to get child pornography out of libraries that are targeted to children. Also, I wrote a proposal to our board of supervisors to get cell phones out of schools. So if your kids are on their phones, if their kids are on their cell phones all day long, videoing people who can't even sit in their classrooms in freedom to learn from the teachers because they're getting made fun of on bullying sites. If you can't go to the bathroom and use the bathroom without being scared, one, a predator is going to be in there, or two, that you're going to be videoed in a private moment. You know, the anxiety, the cheating that goes on between phones, it's really not difficult. I've written up the proposal. Get the phones out of the schools and the parents take the authority back, and you have saved children 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for how many years of that mental health problem that is associated with the addiction of technology. And we can do that. And there are ways that's happening. People are doing it. There is pushback because parents, that's can be challenging. Teachers, it's challenging, but it can happen. And so the mental health part is so important for some of these things to be taken back. And parents need to reclaim the minds and hearts and souls of their children because right now, if you can see what's happening in the education system, it's a scary place. And personally, I am leading a biblical education expo tomorrow. There's several from this group to teach how parents can gain the empowerment to teach their children, to disciple them, and to teach them what's right and wrong so they're not victimized, they're not over sexualized, and there's power and protection there. So thank you for allowing us to be heard and for making those changes on our behalf.
Thank you. Thank you. Really good. Just a couple things I'd point out is that at the heart of this is engagement and owning our communities and owning our families. And so thank you for both of your leadership, everybody here. There was a bill that was passed that required a child to get parental authorization to open up an account on a pornography site. That got passed and signed into law. And interestingly, one of the leading pornography sites decided they don't want to do business in Virginia anymore. I thought that was a good thing. And I also want to just highlight again the fact that there is a real need for us to engage in our kids' lives. And Virginia historically has been ranked very low in mental and behavioral support for youth. And we're going to change that. I mean, literally, I think Virginia was ranked in the bottom five. We're going to change that. And for those of you that know me at all, I don't like being at the bottom. I like being at the top. And we're going to be number one on this. We're going to have the very best behavioral and mental health support system and response system in America. That is the objective. That's what we're driving to. Not to just be good, but to be the very best. And part of that is making sure that we have infrastructure in place to support our kids. And so thank you for your ideas.
This is just a question, and I don't know the answer. Is there a limit, an age limit, if you were to go into a 7-Eleven and buy one of the prepaid cell phones? Or could a 13-year-old walk in and buy a prepaid cell phone? I honestly have never seen an age restriction,
Anybody know the answer to that?
because that's not,
There's no age restriction. You go to Walmart and buy a prepaid phone. They don't ask for any identification. Like if you were to go buy alcohol, it would flag the self-checkout to, get your ID. Or if you were to buy a knife, like I bought, just a flip knife, it flagged, in Roanoke City, it flagged for them to check my ID.
So what do you
But
think of
for
that?
a prepaid cell phone,
Really good.
no.
that might be something.
Let me, I'm just watching our time. All right, let me ask one more question while we're all here. And David, you mentioned this a little bit, which is, there's federal action on this as well. And the federal action, is, not comprehensive. The pushback from the big tech companies, is, interesting, the mirror image of the pushback we get at the state level. And the federal action is, once again, trying to protect kids and make sure that the data is not gathered and sold, that can't be marketed to, et cetera. And David, as we think about the opportunity next session going in, are there things that, as we begin to craft legislation, that might be additive to what you put in last time?
Yeah, I think we also, need to say what happens with children's data when they do turn 18. And, I think we need to look for how we're protecting all of Virginians' privacy data. But I mean, especially concerned about the underage folks. You know, like I said earlier, saying that at 13 you're an adult, so you're not gonna get any more legal protection in this area, even though you get legal protection in all these other places. I mean, everyone else would find it horrifying if, 15-year-old kid goes into a store and the store manager follows them around the whole time, writing what they're looking at. And then when they walk down the street, continues with them and, trades that data with the next store and says, here's what they were looking at here, and, continues doing that. But that's exactly what's happening in the digital version.
Thank you. I first want to, again, thank everybody. We are champions for parents. And the Parents Matter movement started in Virginia. It was extraordinary to watch it happen. And it happened because parents, not Republicans, not Democrats, but parents stood up and said that what's happening in our children's lives with other people making decisions for our children is not acceptable. And it has been across the Commonwealth, and it's been amazing to watch it spread across the country. We're going to continue to be champions for parents. I was thrilled recently to sign a bill that, of course, our General Assembly passed, that mandates that if a child is bullied in school, if there's a bullying incident in school, that parents have to be notified within 24 hours. It was a joyful and yet tear-filled bill signing, because the family that was the inspiration for this bill had lost a very young teenager to suicide. And they found out later that he had been bullied in school and nobody had ever told them. And that was their inspiration for the bill. And they, out of ashes came green shoots. And out of ashes, this very brave family worked with our General Assembly members and got a very important bill passed. So we are going to continue to champion the rights of parents, your fundamental right to make the decisions with regards to your children's education, their well-being, and their care, right? and their health. These are just critical areas that parents must be at the head of the table. And I appreciated the earlier comment about just that, not just at the table, but at the head of the table. We're also working very hard to reestablish excellence in education. And part of our kids' opportunities in life is stretching them, of opening up avenues for them, avenues that they may not have ever thought of. And that is a group effort with parents at the head of the table, with great teaching, with extraordinary exposure to other opportunities that they might not have seen before. And I'm very excited about the fact that just yesterday, Roanoke College was granted a lab school planning grant to open up a lab school right here, Salem High School, that would be specifically dedicated to students who might not want to go to college. They might want to do something else. They might want to get a credential. They might want to have an IT credential and go to work right away. But to open up multiple pathways for our kids, and so they can understand that they can be successful in so many ways in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And finally, these conversations, oftentimes people think about things afterwards. This is something I was thinking about, and I wanted to make sure I expressed to somebody. Your electives are here, and so reach out to us. You can always come into the governor's website, and there's a big tab you can hit, which is constituent services. Send us a note. Our team gets them, we process them. I see a lot of them. It's one of the things I really enjoy doing is reading the notes and emails and listening to the voicemails, because we get a lot of them from folks. Some of them aren't so nice, some of them are. But I think it's our job to listen to everybody. And I think that's really, really important. And so please reach out to us, to the delegates, to the senators, and let's just stay deeply, deeply engaged in our children's lives. It's just so important. And so with that, if we could, I would, if you all don't mind, part of, I think, the Parents Matter initiative and movement is that there's lots of parents involved. And so if we could, I would love, if we could, that you all kind of stand up, but don't worry about moving. And then actually David and I will kind of move in the bunch so maybe we get a picture going that direction. That works for everybody. I want to thank everybody. God bless you. Thank you for being here.
Sorry. Face this way.
This way.
Very sorry.
All right, there you go.
Yeah, I need you to face that one.
I'm going to turn around this way. Everybody turn around this way. And then Austin will get up tall. And that way I'm going to go in here.
I need everyone to squeeze in as much as they can.
Squeeze in. Okay.
If you're on this side, you can squeeze in more.
Okay.
Thank you.
Austin, can you get really tall?
Yes, I can just help.
Or just Austin, here comes a chair.
Thank you.
You're not blocking
Thank you, sir.
Before we,
I think there's some kids right there.
How are you?
all right, 1, 2, 3. Can everyone squeeze in just a little bit more? Perfect. 1, 2, 3. Perfect.
Good? Okay, thank you all very, very much. Thank you. Appreciate
Short answer is the school.